We now have an American pope, a phenomenon never before experienced in our nation's history, in the history of the papacy. Cardinal Robert Prevost, a Chicago-born and, wait for it, Villanova graduate. How cool is that? Now Pope Leo XIV. He praised his predecessor, Pope Francis, as he stepped out onto the balcony of St. Peter's for the first time as the world's 267th pope. At the White House, President Trump, whose relationship with the late Pope Francis was marked by some disagreements and vastly different worldviews, highlighted the new pope's American roots.
I do, yes. They have already spoken to us, and we'll see what happens. But again, to have the Pope from the United States of America, that's a great honor.
We'll see how long the praise from the top lasts, as attention quickly turned to a flurry of X posts from an account posted under Prevost's name that could be interpreted as disagreeable to some Trump administration policies. Let's rewind to that terrible 2017 Las Vegas shooting tragedy. The account reposted this retweet from Democratic Senator Chris Murphy calling for a stop to gun violence. 2018, a retweet completely distancing the Catholic Church from the first Trump administration's immigration policies. Quote, "There is nothing remotely Christian American or morally defensible about a policy that takes children away from their parents and warehouses them in cages. This is being carried out in our name, and the shame is on all of us." Now we go to 2020. This same account addressed the death of George Floyd, the violence that erupted after that, and called for unity, offering prayers to the Floyd family and a push to end racism. In 2021, in the heat of COVID, a retweet in support of the COVID vaccine and everyone getting immunized. Now we jump to this year, February. Just before he was Pope, we go to a post referencing a theological debate on immigration started by Vice President J.D. Vance. It says, quote, "J.D. Vance is wrong. Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others." And another tweet from the same account weeks later also linked to an article critical of the vice president's immigration policies. And then most recently in April, the account retweeted a post from a Catholic commentator who called out Trump and El Salvador's president for laughing about the deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia of Maryland. Pope Leo's older brother offering this.
I think he sees the United States is headed in the wrong direction in terms of immigration. That this is a total injustice. These are people.
But there are indications that the White House and the new pontiff might not be fated for a complete standoff. J.D. Vance congratulated Pope Leo on Twitter, adding, quote, "I'm sure millions of American Catholics and other Christians will pray for his successful work leading the church. May God bless him." We're learning this pope may even be more aligned with some Trump administration policies than had been Francis. For example, his critique of mass media. According to the Washington Post, quote, "Leo in 2012 told bishops that media depictions of the modern family present a major challenge to the Catholic Church. Note, for example, how alternative families comprised of homosexual partners and their adopted children are so benignly and sympathetically portrayed on television programs and in the cinema." That's what he said at the time. We're also learning that Pope Leo voted in 4 general elections and 3 Republican primaries. While we shouldn't take that as a full sign of the Pope's political leanings, because in Illinois, the state he's registered, you're not required to register as members of a specific political party. So, given all of this, are we seeing the early signs of a showdown pitting America First versus the first American Pope? It all brings me to today's poll question at Smerconish.com. Was the election of Pope Leo XIV, an American, a deliberate choice meant to contrast with President Donald Trump? Joining me now to break it all down on how this papal and political relationship will play out, former Democratic Senator from Indiana, former United States Ambassador to the Holy See under President Biden, Joe Donnelly. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for being here. What's your gut reaction as I walk through the presumed social media of the now pontiff?
I don't think that he was elected as a response to Donald Trump. I don't think this was about Donald Trump. It was about the church and about who could be the best leader, who could follow Francis. And I don't think there's any surprise in those tweets that you've talked about, because, you know, President Trump is the president of the United States. Pope Leo is the Holy Father for the world. And so his agenda and President Trump's agenda don't necessarily match up, especially in areas of immigration where Pope Leo's preferential option, as the term is used often, is for the poor. And his focus is to try to help that child who is most in need as well as somebody who's well off. And so he has that perspective.
Take me into your last role as ambassador to the Holy See. What's the nature behind the scenes of how presidents and pontiffs deal with one another, and through whom? I presume you played that role on the watch of President Biden and Pope Francis.
I did. For example, the G7, that was all a lot of government leaders, was in June of 24 in southern Italy, and I was President Biden's teammate on that in the meetings with Pope Francis. And so the meetings are really cordial. There was a deep friendship there, but both sides are fierce advocates for their countries. The Pope for the Vatican, President Biden and President Trump for the United States. And so you agree on a lot of things, but there are some things you don't. And it's a very blunt discussion, a very upfront discussion, but you agree on so many more things than you disagree on.
Mr. Ambassador, how long would you think goes off the clock before there's a papal audience with President Trump? I know that when new presidents come into the Oval Office, everybody looks for a sign as to who will first be invited, where the president will take his or her first overseas trip. What's the calculus in a dynamic like this with Pope Leo and President Trump?
I think if President Trump wanted to go there now, they'd be happy to be with him. But I don't think that's the calculus for Pope Leo as to which meeting I'm going to have first or this or that. But I do think, to your point about a trip, there'll be a message sent to where he goes first. And my guess is it will be to an area where the poor are struggling, where there are challenges, and where his presence there can lend an incredible moral voice to try to help with the struggles that the people are having.
Just a few days ago, those far more knowledgeable about papal politics than yours truly were all of the opinion there will never be an American pope because there's already such a concentration of power in the United States. There's no way that the church is going to allow that to happen. And you've already cast your ballot on my poll question today. Catherine, can we put it back up on the screen? Because I want to ask the ambassador about it again. So I'm asking this. Was the election of Pope Leo XIV, an American, a deliberate choice meant to contrast with President Donald Trump? You don't think, Mr. Ambassador, that in the Sistine Chapel among the College of Cardinals, they were thinking themselves, Trump has been such a worldwide disruptive force, and in a way that on some issues the church is at odds, wouldn't it send a great message if, in fact, the next pontiff is also an American?
Was it the primary thought? No, their primary thought is about making sure the church finds their best leader. Would it have been part of the calculus at some point? Perhaps. But the thing you have to know about Pope Leo is if he wasn't an American, he probably would have been the top contender. And people would have looked at him that way because he's such a good manager. On doctrine, Michael, what he has the ability to do is, like, to the left and to the right, they both are comfortable with him. And he's got that whole I'll give you 70% of something as opposed to 100% of nothing to both sides. And then on top of that, he has just done extraordinary in every job he's held. And so they look at him as somebody who fills the bill. And the comments made about him, because he served in Peru, served in the Vatican for many years as the head of the Augustinian order, is that he was the least American of the Americans. And so that was kind of like a permission slip to everybody in the room, I think.
A Villanova class of 77 graduate. Yes. Can you imagine? Huh? How cool is that?
As a Notre Dame class of 77 graduate, I can assure you Notre Dame is very, very jealous of Villanova today.
Right. Jay Wright just became the second most famous, Villanova person. Ambassador,
right.
thank you for being here. Appreciate.
Thanks.
Go ahead, finish.
Thank you. I was just going to say, and his degree was in math and physics, which blows me away.
Unbelievable. Yeah. I feel intimidated already. Okay, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Everybody else, you still have time to vote on today's poll question at Smerconish. I think I turned the ambassador a little bit at the end. I think he all of a sudden was open to the prospect of today's poll question. There it is. You already know what it is. Make sure while you're there, you subscribe to the newsletter at smerconish.com. You'll get exclusive editorial cartoons like this from Rob Rogers.